Okay, so when you're using ELAN, you should think about the goals for your transcript and how those match up with some concepts that are built into ELAN, such as tiers, which I'm going to be talking about shortly. And they were mentioned in the video as well. So first, I'd like to go through a few examples of different kinds of transcripts that include different information. So first, this transcript is from a Radiolab program, and it's just one language and one speaker. So here we have all of the words that Josh says. It's pretty simple to see what's going on here. But you can have, of course, a lot of other kinds of transcripts. This is a transcript of me and my friends playing a board game called Life. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with it, but it's really fun. If you've never played it, I enjoy it. So here we have one language, it's all in English, but we have 4 speakers, me and 3 of my friends. And here the speech is divided into something called intonation units rather than only sentences. So an intonation unit has to do with where the natural breaks are when someone is speaking, which is based off of their intonation. And this transcript also marks overlap. So these brackets show when 2 people are talking at the same time. You can see that we were kind of talking all over each other all the time. And it also marks laughter with these @ signs. When someone starts and then restarts a sentence, someone laughs and kind of inhales loudly, you can mark that with an H. And we also marked long pauses. So depending on what you're doing with your language work, maybe you'd like to mark some of these things in your transcript. And here's another example of a transcript. This is 2 languages and 1 speaker. The speaker is Cecilia Gravel, and she's speaking in Bua, which is a language of Fiji. And this is a story about a wily jackal that steals fish from a crow. And you can see in the italics, we have the text in Bua, and we have the English corresponding below. But you can also include more you can include richer linguistic information with a similar 2 language and 1 speaker setup. So this is a transcript of the pear story in Kannada, which is a language of southwestern India. And the speaker is Keshava Subramanya. And here it's also, the text is divided into sentences and intonation units, which I mentioned earlier, and further into morphemes, which are like the smallest structural units you can have, sometimes smaller than a word. And then each morpheme has its own corresponding definition, which is a gloss. And then you also have, in addition to these word level translations, these glosses, you have a free translation. So again, this is a different kind of transcript with different goals and different information that's included. So now I'd like to talk more about tiers, which were mentioned in the ELAN Lego video. So the basic idea is that everything that's the same kind of information would be part of the same tier in ELAN. So in my example of me playing board games with my friends, everything that my friend Will says would be in the same tier. In the example of the Jackal and Crow story, in the Bua language, all of the English translations of the Bua sentences would be in the same tier. Or in the pear story example, all of the glosses of the Kannada words would be in 1 tier. Or going back to the Lego video, everything that the guy with the red hat says, for example, would be in 1 tier. So now I have a little mini exercise for us to think about to get the hang of this whole tier idea. So let's say that you recorded a conversation between 2 speakers of the Bua language, Cecilia and Seru, and you want to share this recording that you made of the conversation with speakers of English. So how many tiers do you need and what are they? So what information would be in those tiers? You can take a minute to think about this, and then you can put your answer in the chat or unmute yourself, and yeah, let me know what you think about the tiers you'd need here.
So let me see. We have two tiers, one tier for the two speakers of the BOA language and one tier for the gloss with the translation in English.
You're really close. So actually,
okay.
But you're on the right track. So you're right that we would need separate tiers for BUA and English, but we also need separate tiers for each speaker. So we'd need a tier for Cecilia, what Cecilia says in BUA and what that would be in English, as well as what Seru says in BUA and the translations into English. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Awesome. Does this make sense? Anyone have questions about why you need 4 tiers?
I'm actually a bit confused.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I quite got it, but yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to like gesture to show how the ELAN would look like. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna think about, maybe I'm going to actually pull up an ELAN file real quick, and I think that might help you to see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Guillermo, if you remember that cute little Lego movie, basically every person needs their own tier. That's like your baseline starting point. And then if you have additional information, in this case, in this example, it was the English translation, it makes sense that you just have like person 1 in original language, person 1 in translation, person 2 in original language, person 2 in translation. And now you can see what that looks like.
Thanks, that was a great explanation. And the hypothetical exercise that I gave was based on something that I'm working on now. So I just pulled up that file. You can see the 2 speakers here, Cecilia and Seru. And here I have something that Seru said in the BUA is 1 tier, and here is the English translation. And although Cecilia didn't actually say anything right here, if she did say something, we'd want it on a separate tier from what Seru said. And then we'd have the translation of what she said into English on this 4th tier. Does it make a little more sense once you see it laid out?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Awesome. Then I'll jump back into my slides. So the tiers in ELAN, as you've already seen, are time-based. So they match up along the timeline of the recording. And they also can show when speakers overlap. So for example, these are the names of my friends that I played that board game with, we were all talking at the same time, so we can easily show in ELAN, for example, if Will and Sebi say something and that overlaps, it's easy to see that in ELAN. And in our exercise that we'll be working on today, we're going to be working with a top level tier in ELAN. So a top level tier has a direct representation of the contents of the recording, and it's also always linked to the timeline. And some things that you might want to have in a top level tier could be the words that are spoken, or if there's sign language being signed, you could have a description of that. Or if there's a lot of background noise, maybe you have a description of the background noise in your top level tier. So that's the end of my intro presentation. And next, we're going to work together to start transcribing in ELAN, a part of an audio recording of a talk that Professor Larry Kimura gave at the Six Nations Conference a few years ago. So this will be one language and one speaker. And I actually have some more slides after this that just have step-by-step screenshots of how to set up your file in ELAN and start transcribing. So if at some point while I'm sharing my screen and going through these steps with you, if you get lost at all, you can go into the slides and look at the screenshots. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And before I open up ELAN, does anyone have any questions? Okay, then, and do you all have ELAN downloaded? Is that all good? Awesome. So, let's see, I'm just going to share my desktop. So I'm gonna open up ELAN, and once I have ELAN opened, I'm going to go to File, New. So now, once I clicked on File, New, I have this box, and I can now select the sound file that I'm going to use. So in order to select the sound file, I go to Add Media File. And now I'm going to navigate to where I have that WAV file that we sent out saved. I have it on my desktop. So I click on the WAV file, and then I just hit Open. And now in this box, I have the WAV file showing up there. Is everyone good with that? All right, definitely shout if you have any issues. So now we click OK. And then it looks like this. So here, let me adjust this. Here you can see the sounds of him talking. And here's our default tier. And this is what we're going to be using in order to transcribe the file. So first, we don't want this tier to actually be named default. We want to name it after the speaker. So we go to tier at the top, and then change tier attributes. Click on that. And now I want to name this tier Larry Kimura's text. And the participant is Larry Kimura. And if you get a warning like this, that's okay. We're going to save this file in like 1 second. ELAN can get annoyed if you have a new file open for 10 seconds without saving it, but it's okay. So the participant is Larry Kimura. And then for the annotator, I'm going to put myself. So now that I've changed the tier name, the participant, and the annotator, that's all I need to change. Everything else is fine. So I hit change. And now I can close this window. And if I hover over the label on the left, you can see all of the information. So I can see that I wrote that I'm the annotator, for example. And now going to save the file. Gonna give it a name. Call this Larry. Let's call this Kimura Six Nations. I think that's what I call the WAV file. Okay, so now it's saved. Has everyone been able to get to this point? Any problems? Okay, so let's listen to a little bit of it and see what it sounds like.
So I'll be presenting on new words for Hawaiian immersion. And
so you heard a little bit of Larry Kimura talking. And then let's make our first annotation. Let's take this chunk here. So I highlighted it by clicking at the start and then dragging with my cursor. Gets highlighted in blue. And now I can play the selection.
so I'll be presenting on new words for Hawaiian immersion.
I think I actually want to start there. So I'm gonna listen to it again using this.
I'll be presenting on new words for Hawaiian immersion.
And then in order to make the annotation, I'm going to put my mouse in the tier for Larry Kimura's text and then double click. And then what he said here is I'll be presenting on new words for Hawaiian immersion. And then if I click enter, the transcription gets committed. And then you continue on like that. Let's do one more maybe.
And major concerns would be getting a community to be receptive. So
Let's go until there. Play the selection.
And major concerns would be getting a community to be receptive.
I'm typing in what I heard. And then enter again to get this transcript, this annotation to stay. Has everyone been able to make one annotation successfully, or are there any issues with making an annotation? I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. So once you've made the first couple of annotations, you can go through, how to get the audio file. Yeah, sure, Kelly. So we have it in, Anna already sent it. Right, so once you download the audio file, you can let me know, and then I can go through how to set up the ELAN file again. Are there any other questions about how to start your ELAN file or make annotations?
Can we just get a thumbs up if you're able to make annotations?
Yeah, awesome.
Oh, awesome. I love feedback. And I think I'm going to quickly run through how to set things up again for Kelly, since you didn't have the sound file before. So I'm gonna share my screen again. All right, so I do have the file already made here, but to do a new one, you go to File, New. And then when you have this window pop up, you add the WAV file that you just downloaded. You click Open, and then OK. And then you have this ELAN window. And once you're here, you want to rename this tier because you don't want it to be called default. So you go to Tier and change tier attributes. And then we want to change the tier name. So I'll change it to Larry Kimura's text, and the participant and the annotator is me. And now the name has changed. And then you'll want to save the file. So you just go to File, Save. I'm not sure if the pop-up window is showing. And then in order to make a transcription, you highlight the part that you want to transcribe and you double click in the tier. And then you type what he says. Let's do, oh, actually now I don't want this, this annotation. So I'll show you how to delete an annotation. If you click on it so that it turns blue, and then you right click the annotation, then you have a pop-up menu. And on the pop-up menu, there's an option to delete. So now I've deleted the annotation. I can make a new one.
I'll be presenting on new words for Hawaiian immersion.
So again, in order to make the annotation, I double click here. And then once I've finished typing, I press enter. And this might actually be a good time then to show how you can adjust your annotation. So for example, you might want to move this edge of the annotation to the left. So then on a Mac, at least, it might be different on Windows. You press Option and you hover over the edge of the annotation that you want to change. And then you see the icon change from the mouse. So now I can drag this wherever I want.
Shirley, I think we see the old one and not the new one that you're in.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh no, you're right. I'm sharing the wrong ELAN window. Thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah.
Okay, whoops. Sorry, guys. Okay, now I'm in the, thanks for telling me. Now I'm in the ELAN window that I'm sharing, and I'll show those things again. So let's say I want to change this annotation and shift the front edge backwards. So I hold down on Option until I get this icon, and then I can drag it, and you can see that it turns green. So I can shift it back and forth. Or if I want to delete the annotation, I double click on it, and then I can go to delete in a pop-up menu. Or I might want to combine this annotation with the next annotation. I might want to merge them. So I double clicked on the annotation, and then I can click merge with next annotation in the pop-up menu. And then they combine. So those are some things you might find yourself wanting to do as you transcribe in ELAN. Yeah, so if you guys want to take like 10 minutes or so and just work on transcribing this file, then you can let us know if you're running into any problems and we can troubleshoot. Yeah. Oh, I see the chat from Caroline Running Wolf. Yes, definitely. You can ask your question on granularity.
Yeah, so I'm just always confused about how detailed to transcribe. I noticed that when you were doing the example, you left out the ahs and the ums, and it makes sense for, you know, reading the text, I guess. However, if you're thinking of it from the perspective of a language learner, would it be helpful for them to know here's an ah or an
That's a really good question. And I think it could be possibly depending on, you know,
How many?
Yeah, I admit I'm not an expert on language pedagogy. So I assume that there are some cases when it would be really helpful for a language learner to know, you know, speakers of this language say and ah in this way. And, you know, these are the places in their speech where they might naturally say and ah, but possibly for a language learner at a more basic level, it could be confusing, or maybe it would distract them from the other things that are going on. So I'm not sure if I have anything very helpful to say on this, but possibly, yes, it could be helpful.
Can I add a thought?
Of course.
One of the nice things about doing really detailed transcription while you're doing the transcription is it kind of opens up possibilities for other things you can do with that data later on. And so, for example, like when I was recording interviews, I usually put in the ums and ahs just because if at some point in the future I wanted to learn about how people break up their speech in IASA, if I just do it right now while I'm already transcribing, then that opens up, like, I can do a search for all of the ums and, you know, figure out where ums go in this language later on, even if I'm not going to use it for this paper I'm writing right now. I think it's like a little bit of extra work can pay off big in the future, one of those kind of things. But if you're really in a hurry, skip the ums and the ahs.
Yeah, the background why I'm asking this is because, Anna, you might know, we're working on a automatic speech recognition project. And so I also, in addition to, you know, the human learner, I also have the thought of what about the machine learner? do they need to have the transcription of all the sounds, even if those sounds are only ums and ahs? But I'm sure everyone else is caught up now with the transcription, so I'll be quiet again.
For the automated speech recognition, though, I'm sure if you talk to people who are working in that field, they would be able to tell you in an instant if you should be transcribing the ums or ahs from that purpose. For that purpose, I'm tripping over my words. But yeah, I hope making ASR for your language goes well. I know that's a challenge.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions about ELAN in general or this exercise and transcribing in particular?
While we're all just sitting here, can I say one more thing about granularity now that you got me thinking about it, Caroline? I think
Sure.
I think also transcribing those little vocalisms like the ums and the ahs and things like that, that can really help later on when you're looking at discourse analysis of things like how people express certain sentiments in your language. Like I transcribed all that stuff in a lot of my interviews, and then later on I went back through and just did a search. Like I wrote as TSK, and when I went back and did a search for that and looked all the places where that came up, it got some really interesting stuff about how people expressed like scorn or dismissiveness. Like it allowed me to just like automatically pull all the examples where somebody was being kind of sassy or brushing something off. So it's useful for that. Like it's like putting bookmarks in for yourself to go find stuff later, basically.
Thanks for that insight, Anna, because I was torn between Shirley's approach, which is definitely smoother for reading and makes more sense in a lot of cases, and the very fine-grained granularity, because I was thinking as a learner, regardless of human or machine, you need to know this sound was said at this point in time, even if it doesn't help for the sentence as such. And I didn't like either approach too much, but now at least I have some ideas of why it might be good.
Well, the cool thing about ELAN is you got multiple tiers, so you can have like a clean tier and then like a detailed tier if you want to put in that much work, if you're that hardcore.
Don't give me ideas.
Is everybody finding it pretty easy to do this like one tier transcription now that you got the hang of the basics?
Yay, then we accomplished our goal for today. Awesome. So if you want to move on to more advanced ELAN stuff, my slides only explain how to do the very basic transcription, but I'm going to send in the chat a link to Andrea Beres-Croker's ELAN slides, which show how to go much more complicated. If you want to work through those on your own time, I think they're very useful. I see we have one new person who just joined us. So Jair Martinez, we're getting to the end of this workshop, but if you want to look at the slides that I used yourself, I'm going to link to them in the chat.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I wanted to make a quick comment. I tried writing it down, but honestly, it's going to take forever. Regarding to the question about if that people are using like a technological device in order to
The
hear.
sound, Perla, we can hardly hear you.
I don't know if you guys can hear me or not.
Now it's good.
Yeah? Okay. So when the question for if people are using some kind of technological device in order to actually be able to hear the transcribed part. So in a technological assistance course that I took for autism, we were told to omit the ums, the buts, the anything that is excessive. Because if the person is little of hearing or can at least follow along to some parts, they might get lost trying to listen to what the transcription is saying and also paying attention. So sometimes the shorter it is better for them to keep along and keep reading along and kind of try to keep track, because we are hearing the ums, we're not paying attention to them. But if the text is all how can I say it? If it's like cluttered with a lot of those kinds of words, they're gonna lose the sense of what they're trying to read. And maybe for someone that is able to read faster, it's gonna be okay. But for someone that needs a little bit more time, it might just be worse for them. So that's something I wanted to say.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that depending on what the goals are for what you're doing with the transcript and who the audience is, it might not be good to include the ums and the ahs, and it might take away from what you're trying to do in that situation. Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
The example they use mostly, it's sometimes when just reading a PDF, just having a device read a PDF, if you have images, it tells you like you should describe the image in the least words possible so that the person can continue and not get stuck on those. You would think that someone that doesn't have sight can't see a PowerPoint, but they can, and they can see the images, or at least hear what those images are. Just describe it in as little words as possible so that they continue.
Makes a lot of sense. Do we have any other questions or comments from anyone? Then I think we might end a little bit early. So after this, I'm going to be putting the recording on the Facebook page, as well as my slides and a link to those other resources. And if you have any questions later, you can always reach out to me or Anna. So thanks for coming, everyone. I hope this was helpful. Have a great rest of your day and a good weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
I feel like that went well.
Yeah, I think so. Everybody like got it pretty quick.
I was
Nope.
expecting there to be more problems.
Yeah, no, I think you made it so clear that it was just like, boom, everyone is now transcribing.
Awesome. At one point I was thinking like, man, maybe I should have prepared more material. It's so fast.
No, it's good. It's everybody got to like practice and focus. And I hope it was okay if I jumped in on that granularity question. I spent a long time thinking about that for discourse analysis.
Oh no, that was a great answer. Thank you. And when people ask me questions when I'm giving a presentation, even if it's a question that I normally can answer fine, I get really nervous and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And I'm screen sharing. So
Yeah, it's very like putting on the spot. Yeah, but you did great. That was a great session. And I'm sorry, I forgot to remind you to record.
oh, it's okay.
I was like, I'm totally going to remind you. With the two of our brains on this, you can't forget.